I want to get back, though, to the young mechanical. We're talking about Zen. We're talking about the players. I want to know about the future of Rocket League. As coaches, is it coming from young guns on the up? Or as I said, is it more, are we still yet to, I guess, fully uncover the mental side of things and like seeing what Gen G are doing? You know, it's not just like the 3 most mechanical players in the world. Or is there room for just mechanically different players? Like, let's just say Zen comes in. How much of an impact is him just being mechanically better going to have versus having the best like team composition or having a Gen G like outfit?
Yeah, I think that in that conversation, I remember, was it like a month ago, everyone was sort of talking about like super teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when people talk about super teams, their criteria is these guys have got the most goated mechanics. They just kill everyone, and that's basically it. And that's their criteria of a super team. Whereas to me, it's like I'm almost willing to challenge that and go, hey, like, would a super team involve? Yeah, like you can't have to be the jack of all trades. It's that you're very much like a very how to describe this is, yeah, you've got the mechanics, you're fantastic, but to some degree it's like you have to have that communication, you have to have that professional engagement. There's just so much to it, right? And I do feel like there's this there's this balanced, it's kind of like, think of it like an RPG, right? You know, people put their stats into strength and dexterity, intelligence, right? You know, and maybe some players, they invest all their points into mechanics, right? And you know, and that, don't get me wrong, like that can work though. But I would love to see, it's like, hey, like, you know, 3 of the most mechanical players team up and see how that would stack up against, say, like a Gen G that have so much more than just mechanics working for them. Obviously, I don't have an answer to it because, you know, we've yet to sort of see these things get tested through. But, you know, when you really think back at the really successful teams, it seems to be, it's like, it wasn't mechanics necessarily at the cornerstone of what made them work. It's sure they have mechanics, they're top tier players, but at the same time, there were other elements too that aren't necessarily seen on the actual stage itself, right? And that's sort of like my only question. It's like, hey, if we talk about super athletes or super esport athletes, what else makes them super, that supplement their mechanics, let's just say. That's sort of what I'm kind of flagging there as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think before the show started, we were kind of, someone mentioned the NRG roster when they picked up Turbo, and I never thought Turbo was the most mechanical or the most pure skill, but he did dominate the field.
Yeah.
And I considered that like an at present super team. Like, not, they wouldn't be a super team now, but at the time I was like, how are you going to compete with that? And it's not because Turbo is this crazy mechanical god like Justin, but you kind of put those two pieces together and it kind of formed a super team of the time.
It's more so he wasn't like a superstar player. It's just like what value he brought on LAN. He played on what? How many teams on LAN, and he's always gotten first place somehow or top 8 on like many different rosters. He brings so much value in that aspect. So he becomes like a superstar in himself.
Yeah.
He was still mechy though, like Johnny said. He honestly, he was like the OG like LAN ice, like just always was able to sort of step up. You know, even when he owned goals in Game 5 finals.
I wouldn't say he's more mechanical than Fiber. They're probably on par, if not. I feel like Fireburner was a little bit better mechanically. It's just like he just was always in the best position compared to Fireburner. Yeah, and when it came down to pressure, he played better.
I mean, he was. I
wouldn't say better mechanics.
I think that was still during the days where it's like, were players actually like translating from online to LAN, and like Turbo like pretty consistently translated. And I think it was before everyone translates like they do now, or almost everyone.
I don't know. Johnny keeps saying that Turbo had better mechs.
Turbo is, I don't know. I didn't think
Turbo was a mechy player. Though. Like, it's like, you know, are we talking 5-star skill moves, or are we talking just consistently? You know, I think that Turbo's positioning was just flawless. Like, he just always just set him up for success.
That's not mechanics. That's like decision making.
Always had a good read and awareness. Like, he just had way better awareness.
He was faster to the ball
and reads.
Johnny
says
the
ball isn't mech. So.
Oh yeah, faster ball could be all based on your positioning. If you have the same like fast aerial speed as another player, like comparing Turbo to Fire, of course Turbo's gonna be faster the ball because why? Turbo had better decision making and planned around his path on the field better.
So my definition of mechanics is different. Like, my mechanics is like what you do with the ball, not where you read the ball faster. You know what I mean? Like,
either way, like, yeah, if you put Turbo and Fireburner in a head-to-head, I don't think it's like, hey, thank goodness Turbo brought all of these advanced mechanics that Fireburner didn't have, and that's what made the difference. I think, his real value were a multitude of other things that he brought to the team, right? It wasn't like, someone cloned Justin and now it's like, hey, now we have two mechanical gods on the team. It was, hey, he brought something else. Yeah, like, you can probably head-to-head and, you can make a case for Fireburner having excellent mechanics or Turbo having better, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I don't think I never saw a Reddit thread being like, mechanical god Turbo Pulsar has joined NRG, and everyone's like, that's what they needed, right? He brought a lot more to the table. So yeah.
Yeah, when you think about it, nearly all the LAN teams, it was never just like three, zero brains, full mech. There's always at least a lot of the time there's a general, to a lot of it, or just a player holding it down. Even you look at, I guess you could say the most mechy team at the time mechanically ahead would have been like Cloud9 Season 6, but they still had top right Tommy like locking it down, whilst Gimmick.
Oh, he wasn't top right Tommy back then.
Yeah, he was MVP Tommy. He wasn't just top. He was everywhere.
He was New Wave Gibbs, if I'm being honest.
New Wave Gibbs. Yeah, there's always someone locking it down, which is, again, we have all. It feels like we have all the historical proof of what, like, the recipe for success. Even you see Gen G now, like, Noli admits that he's not the most mechanical player or best individually, but what could he bring that's better than everyone else in other areas? Like, we have so much proof from previous LAN winners, the most successful teams, about not just having, 3 15-year-olds that can just clip on kids as the recipe for success, but feels like we still harp on that so much, like how good someone is individually, purely on mechanics. Like, I know a lot of people still say, they love, the generals and stuff, but it's really not as talked about enough, I guess, what else you bring into the team. And a lot of the time as well, when people talk about roster changes, like, well, they got to kick that guy because he's the worst player on the team. And by worst player, they mean like he's not clipping on kids. He's not the one hitting the flip resets, but it might be, well, the other person might be like toxic, or they might not be, bringing the most to the team. They might not be showing up all the time for scrims or showing up bringing their best attitude. They might be hindering the team in other ways. But at the same time, they're intangibles or things that, the Reddit or the public can't see. So it's hard for them to judge on that, like comms.